Hello, I'm Justin Dehan, and welcome to Hockey Hardware Episode 2. And this time we have three pieces to talk about, all from the same event, and that is the 1972 Summit Series. And our first item is a paperweight that was awarded to all the members of Team Canada. This particular one was given to Frank Mahovlich, the Big M. Frank played on the team alongside his brother Peter. They were not the only brother duo on the team, as Phil and Tony Esposito also wore those Canadian jerseys and had big moments, respectively, each of them for the team. And there was another brother duo that was supposed to play on that team, and that was Dennis, who did play, was supposed to be joined by his bigger and better brother, Bobby Hall. Bobby had just signed with the WHA, and the NHL had threatened to withhold sending their players if the WHA was allowed to participate. So the first kind of thing that Canada faced in this series, the first bit of adversity, did not come from the culture over in the Soviet Union, did not come from playing a new style of play, but it came from politics. Of course, that's just the way it goes, right? Our second item, we have a Player of the Game ring. This was awarded to a Player of the Game after one of the 8 matches. And this particular ring found itself in the possession of Red Fisher, who was given the ring. Unfortunately, he couldn't remember who it was that gave it to him. And our third item is a Team of the Century ring that was awarded to Bill White, defenseman Bill White. This ring was minted in the year 2000 after the Canadian press named Team Canada 1972 the Team of the Century. And Bill White ended up leading Team Canada. It's got one of the unsung heroes. He ended up leading Team Canada in everybody's favorite statistic, and that is, of course, plus minus. Bill was a +7, and no matter what you think of that particular stat, it's certainly impressive among a team of all-stars in a close series to be the leader of a statistic like that. Bill also added a goal, and he wasn't known for scoring many goals in his career. He added a goal in the 8th and deciding game. So he did have a big impact on the series as a whole. Now the series itself, we'll talk a little bit about the conditioning of both teams. The Soviet side, they trained year-round. They were together as a team year-round, and they were really some of the first players that really used a weightlifting regimen and a workout regimen as part of their training. And the NHL side, they decided to give up some of their summer to play in the Summit Series, and it was stated that a lot of them really came to training camp out of shape, which was common in that time, as a lot of players had jobs outside of hockey, and a lot of players didn't really keep in shape. That was what training camp was for. And when it came to working out, it was said that the only workout that they did in training camp was the few sit-ups they did in the hall as Harry Sinden barked at them to get them done. So some players compared it to, we were in preseason training camp form, and they were in Stanley Cup Finals form ready to go. And despite that, Team Canada came into it a little bit overconfident. In Game 1 in Montreal, they jumped out to an early lead and ended up getting blown out 7-3, and that kind of shocked them and sent some shockwaves through the Canadian hockey world. This was supposed to be Canada's game. It was supposed to be easy. The NHL was supposed to be the best league in the world, and also it set up what makes this series so important, is that it wasn't easy, and that these Russian players were great. They had some great goaltending in Vladislav Tretiak and some other players of note as well. In Game 4, the Russians won again, to the point where in Vancouver now fans booed Team Canada. And then for Games 5, 6, 7, and 8, they would play those over in Russia, and you would see some of the culture shock. And we talked about Bill White for his ring, and one of the instances of culture shock really has to do with Bill White, and that was a lot of the players would bring bubble gum to hand out to kids in the streets of Russia who came to gather to see Team Canada, and Russian soldiers, Soviet soldiers, would try and keep the kids away. They would yell at players for throwing gum into the crowd, and a piece of gum landed by the foot of a soldier, and the soldier reacted when a kid reached for it by stepping on his foot. And Brad Park and Bill White went and they confronted the soldier. They were shocked and, you know, really a shocking moment, something to witness, something that we in Canada at that time and today would never imagine a soldier stomping on a child's foot. So they went and immediately confronted the soldier, and the soldier, probably never having been confronted in his life, didn't know how to react, and apparently he just walked away. But, you know, still a very courageous moment by Bill White and Brad Park off the ice to really show what the Canadian values were. Canada also brought some stuff with them to the Soviet Union, some amenities that they couldn't find or that weren't agreeable to the Canadians. And one of those things may resonate with the hoarders of today during the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was Canadian toilet paper. Dennis Hall would go on to describe the Russian toilet paper. He would compare it to linebacker Dick Butkus. He would say, they're both rough, they're both tough, and they both don't take crap from anybody. So they had to bring some of their own amenities to them. Now, the last game they played in Canada, they got booed in their home arena, and now they're over in Russia, and in Canada, the Canadian world is frenzied. They're very passionate. We're heading into the 8th game. Kids are watching the game in school. Teachers are playing it for them in the classroom, in gyms around the country. And the Canadians, they got some telegrams, some messages, but a lot of them stated they didn't know how important this moment would be in hockey history, because in Russia they didn't really have access to this information. This is before Twitter, before Instagram, and before a lot of things. So they didn't really understand the magnitude of the moment, aside from just playing in these games. So going into the 8th game, each team got to pick their referee, rotating through the series, and the 8th game was supposed to be Canada's turn, but they were told the referee they picked was out sick, so Joseph Kampala would referee the 8th game, and they were dismayed at that, as Kampala had really made some calls that they didn't agree with in previous game, and now they were stuck with him in the deciding game. And that pretty much came to a head early as J.P. Parisi, that's Zach Parisi's father, snapped his stick and he skated towards Kampala like he was going to hit him in the head, and at the last second skated away. So heading into the 3rd period, Team Canada is down 5-3. They're set to go back on the ice, and what do they find before they go back on the ice? An inch of water left on the ice from the flood, and head coach Harry Sinden said, we're not going back on the ice until it's frozen. It's believed by a lot of the Canadian players that that was an intentional thing that the Russians, that the Soviets had done. They wanted to slow them down and knew that skating through an inch of water would slow the game down and would allow the final buzzer to ring with the Soviet squad in the lead. And so after waiting an extra 10 minutes, they jumped on the ice, and Phil Esposito scored to bring them within 1, and Yvan Cournoyer scored another goal to tie the game, but the goal light didn't go off. Now, that's not really a big deal, but to one of the spectators in the audience, Alan Eagleson, at that point the hockey agent of Bobby Orr, and now is a disgraced hockey agent when we look back at him, but at that time he was a pretty well-known figure. He charged the goal judge because he was shocked the goal light didn't go on, and Soviet soldiers stopped him, and some of the Canadian players had to rescue him, and there was said to be 2 camps of people going to rescue him. The first camp of people that were really worried about him, and the second camp that they didn't really like him, and they ended up being more in the right than the wrong there in their distrust of him. And some players even said, we should have left him there. But they didn't. The game was tied, and with 2 minutes left, it was said that the Russian officials were celebrating in their box because they had scored more goals in the series, and that was the tiebreaker at the time. So with the tie game in the 8th game, the Russians would take the victory. Then with 34 seconds left, a moment that we all remember, whether you saw it live or like me on a DVD decades later, it's a fantastic moment where Paul Henderson buries his own rebound and scores what would end up being the series-clinching goal, a goal that he would soon after believe that was what he was put on this earth to do, and it's one of the things that caused him to become a born-again Christian, and a pretty defining moment of his career and a defining moment of Canadian hockey history. After the game, Dennis Hall would ask Yvon Cornwallis, "Is this like winning the Stanley Cup?" And Yvon Cornwallis responded, "It's 10 times better." So truly a great moment in Canadian hockey history. These three items are items from that era and items that represent Team Canada. Thank you for joining us for episode 2, and we'll be back with another episode next week. Please like, follow, subscribe, and right now, as long as this pandemic is going along, please stay inside as well.